Well, hello to everybody. Thank you so much for coming. The subject was raised earlier of when are we going to get all the topics and the links and everything that we talk about at these sessions onto the website, the Great Collaboration website. And the news about that is that it's taken eons longer than anybody expected to actually get the technical issues sorted out of transferring the website from one owner to another. The ownership has changed hands quite perfectly, simply and legally, but the actual technical barriers to getting it under control and putting it into a sandpit so we can play with it has proven much more complicated than expected. But I'm assured for the third time this week that it's all going to happen this week. So hopefully we'll be able to start making changes and adding all the bits and pieces that people are asking for. And in particular, the splendid links that we get from these conversations and the ideas will all get put into the website so that people can look at them, can add to them, adjust them, and make rude remarks about them. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that somebody said, why on earth do you call this a banter session? And shouldn't it be something much more grown up? So I thought I'd throw that open to people to think about, to make remarks. I explained to the person who made the objection that we'd taken the name from the parish online meetings that sort of were the precursor to this. And they are very much free-for-all banter sessions. They're light-hearted, they're good-humored, they're full of brilliance and magnificent help. And if there's anyone here who doesn't come to these sessions, then you need your head examined. You should really be looking at Parish Online and the banter sessions. But anyway, if you object to the word banter for great collaboration, and you could think of a much cleverer word to describe what we do, then please do make suggestions. Feel free, and I shall feel free to ignore all those that I don't like. So on those grounds, let me introduce today's topic and speaker to you. Many people, I hope, will already know Joolz. If you don't, then you are welcome to meet sort of a genius in the offing, really. Joolz seems to be able to do everything and cover everything. So the whole process of this, Joolz, is to set you up so that there's no way that anyone can be completely disappointed in what you throw at us. So let me pass over to you. If there are no urgent questions or desperate needs from anybody else, there's absolutely nothing in the chat to say that you don't like what this is called or what we're doing. So I'll assume that there's those things still to come. So Joolz, why don't you please go ahead, take over control of the meeting, tell us what you're going to talk about, and then talk about something completely different, because that's always a good measure.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, nothing. Well, follow that. Wow, what an introduction. Nothing like setting the bar high. So yes, I'm Joolz Thompson. I'm a parish councillor in parish council called Hopton cum Nettishall, which is a pretty rural parish, and actually beaming in from our local community pub, which we'll talk a little bit about today as well, in the neighbouring parish of Thelneatham, and I'm here today to talk about community climate action. So, and I'll just kind of dive straight in, and you're going to get visibility of a presentation delivered to the Suffolk Association of Local Councils, and a little bit more information about the Great Collaboration and some of the tools we're developing. And actually, I'm due to deliver a very similar talk to Newcastle University and a lecture on citizen planning for their Intersections series. So everybody here gets a sneak peek of what's coming next week at Newcastle University. So hopefully you should be able to see my screen, which has a sign on it, iFarm.
Yes.
So as well as a parish councillor, I'm a founder and chair of a community benefit society in Suffolk called iFarm, Ikigai Farm Limited. So we're a community benefit society with an asset lock, not for private profit. And post-pandemic, we went and bought 10 acres of land. And the purpose of our society is reducing loneliness and social isolation and improving health and well-being. And our other purpose is the education, protection and conservation of the environment. So post-pandemic, we thought it was a really good idea to get some space together, get outside, enjoy some nature-based activities, so we could all feel a little less lonely, you know, reconnect those community bonds and cohesion with some limited market gardening, protection and conservation of 4 acres of fen. So on this picture, you can see our field, and then this sort of woody section to the left is 4 acres of fen, woody carr, and we join the Little Ouse River. We're right in the middle of what's called the Waylaw project, which is the Waveney and Little Ouse Recovery Project, which is delivered by Natural England funding and partners with Suffolk Wildlife Trust. And with a section of the river, we have riparian ownership responsibilities for keeping, you know, for the health of the river. This is Dave. He's a forest school teacher, and he's also a volunteered barman at the pub. And you'll hear a bit more about Dave later. And so one of our first tasks was clearing the site of rubbish. It was, you know, it used to be a pig farm, and it was just absolutely covered in detritus and all sorts of rubbish, plastic, metal, tons and tons of stuff, everything you can see, from cookers, fridge freezers, CRT monitors, PlayStation controllers, CDs, you name it. And it's still an ongoing journey for us, cleaning the land as we go. But we have cleared it. We spent the first year clearing it. We've been on the land for about 3 years now. And we put some rigs in, and we've got some limited market gardening. And what we tend to do with our produce at the moment is just give it away. We've won Best in Show and about 12 Best in Classes at our local flower and veg show now. And the Best in Show won a lovely silver cup. And we give our produce away to a charity called Still Good Food, and also just to local residents and patrons of the pub. This is our pub, which was closed for 3 years. It was closed for a year pre-pandemic. And we've come together as a community, lodged an asset of community value status, and then taken on the operation and running of the pub with a team of volunteers. And we've been operating the pub for 2 years now, with a tenancy and an option to purchase. And I'm delighted to announce, as of today, we're serving our option to purchase notice to complete the purchase by the end of February. So very exciting times. And to do that, we've fundraised a significant 6-figure amount from the community, or 5-figure amount at the moment, but we're still going. And that's then match funded through Government Community Ownership Fund match funding for the purchasing of assets of community value that might be at risk of closure. So we've launched a share offer. Everyone's rallied together and invested, and our plans for the pub, and this is where our barman Dave comes back in, are to cover, as Dave says, to cover it in green science. And what that means practically is, as you can see, covering the suitable rooftops with solar power, and installing relevant ground source or air source heat pumps. And most importantly, because the cheapest energy is no energy, retrofitting and renovating the building, because it's a leaky 200-year-old building. And it's a marvelous hub for conversation surrounding the reasons that we are looking to decarbonize and reduce. We've got a powering up and powering down agenda, and reduce our energy costs, because our biggest single cost is our cellar cooler, in terms of utilities to keep the beer warm, and the output from that is hot air that just goes straight up in the air. So it's in the interest of all of our community residents and patrons to understand how we're spending our money, and because it's other people's money, and part of that is energy efficiency. And there's some of our regulars with one of the old signs for the White Horse. We're a democratic organisation, so we have a chair and a management committee and a secretary, and we have a management team for the pub, and we have over, I think I did a head count for COF, for the Community Ownership Fund reporting. We have 53 regular volunteers that help with the operation of the business at the pub and at the land. And we decided we really should embark on some community climate action planning. With the best will in the world, most authorities in the UK and our parliament have declared a climate and ecological emergency and often have a plan. But the plan might encompass a council's own emissions reduction. Some start to step outside of the scope of that into sort of wider society. We're rather blessed that we're in Suffolk, in that Suffolk County Council have an aspiration of being the greenest county in England, and also have a net zero target of 2030, which is world beating. And now that's not just for the council, that's for Suffolk as a whole, and that includes our anchor institutions, our schools, our public sector institutions, our businesses, and our transport. But I think it's highly likely we'll miss 2030, with the best will in the world. That's a difficult rabbit to pull out of a hat. But by aiming for 2030 and having a stretch target, we'll be there or thereabouts, and we're certainly making progress. But as a councillor, I understand, and certainly our district and district councils and county council understand, you can't pass laws. Budgets are very tight, in particular in Suffolk as well. We've recently seen some cuts to services, notably social services, with a parachute payment for Michael Gove replacing some of that money. So if you can't pass laws and you have little budget, and you can only ask and nudge, it starts to become very difficult to affect change beyond the council's immediate operations. So we had this bright idea that we would step in as a community and we would write a community climate action plan. And so we approached our respective parish councils. They agreed it was a good idea. We secured 10,000 in funding from the National Lottery, because they said it was replicable, scalable, and leaves a legacy. And we went on to hold a series of participatory workshops. And the first one was stakeholder mapping. So you can see a picture. This was in our pub. It was a post-it note exercise. Who's around us? Who needs to be involved? Who do we need to talk to? And who are the stakeholders in this process, including our residents, our businesses. And on that stakeholder map, we can see things like land, political organisations, education, transport, local businesses, and hospitality. So for instance, our pub would be included in the hospitality bit. And these are some of the institutions we identified outside of the scope of our geographical area, because stakeholders are not necessarily place-based exactly where you are, but might have an influence in the process. So that includes our district councils, our county council, our respective anchor institutions like our universities and our colleges. Because what's really important is training, and facilitating our young people with the skills required to go and fill the jobs needed for a green transition. And that might be things like retrofitting or installing renewable energy. And we had a visit from Professor Tim O'Riordan, who's Professor Emeritus in Environmental Science at University of East Anglia, who happens to be the chair of the Norfolk Association of Local Councils. And he said there's real scope for Norfolk ALC to explore the lessons being learnt by community climate action in forms of management, financing, recruitment, and of widespread improvements in local livelihood. And that should be connected to county-based devolution at an early stage. So while we are writing a plan for climate, and we are then going to enact the plan, what that incorporates is also systemic change in terms of the productive activity that delivers that. So that might, as I say, might be retrofitting, it might be community renewable energy generation, might even be housing development and net zero development. And so part and parcel of what we do is we really look at the legal form and the funding requirements. So if those activities are delivered by a community benefit society, then the surplus accrues to the benefit of the community and can also contribute back to the coffers of a local authority or a parish council, and actually help provide some of those services I mentioned. So we held a series of workshops. We actually did this over about 3 weekends, or four weekends actually. And we've refined the process over the last year or so. We now deliver it in about a 6-hour a 6-hour workshop. And you can see that the lovely lady in the wheelchair is Levine, who's chair of our parish council. So we had residents, parish councillors, representatives from local conservation organisations and other NGOs attending. And the first part of the process is, we'll leave our ideologies at the door. It doesn't matter how you vote, and we'll take the isms out of it. So because there's more that connects than divides, and the climate is absolutely non-partisan issue. It's a very political issue, but not partisan. So what we focused on are what are our core values. So we all agree what our values are. So everyone gets to write down what their values are, and then everybody gets 3 votes. And you can put a dot by the ones you value the most. And what floats to the surface in terms of our core values as a community were sharing, wild space, community, kindness, fun got a few votes as well. So we start to get a feeling of what our shared or our core values are as a community. And we then go on to look at community resilience and well-being. And if anyone suffered from flooding recently, I mean, that's a really important topic in terms of emergency planning. And I was delighted to attend a previous Banter session on flooding, because I consider myself a bit of an expert on the subject, but I learned several things. So it's really important, and that and how our respective emergency planning to these kind of extreme weather events fits into resilience in a community, and also our well-being. In Storm Babbitt, I was actually on my way to the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales to deliver this exact same workshop. And we only just made it as the roads were closing. And one of the things I noticed in terms of resilience, being in Wales for the weekend, was during the storm, was I went to local co-op, and there was no fresh fruit and veg available, for instance. And that was for a period of days, and that's the consequence of flooding, and that was because of lack of delivery and also panic buying. So there was just, there was nothing on the shelves. So we've talked about, what does community resilience and well-being feel like for everybody? So for me, for instance, I like to have a pint, set the world to rights, listen to a bit of music. So having a pub in the village, having a community pub and a space to gather is important. It's also important for me to have green space, somewhere to go and dig in the ground and grow stuff. And other topics rose to the surface, so including slower living, less stress, better mental health, connecting local farmers to homegrown, local organic food. And when I mention resilience, I was recently at a regenerative farming conference that I spoke at, and one of my fellow speakers said she was one of the most popular people in lockdown because her farm shop supplied the food locally to those that couldn't travel, and where there were shortages. So, where our food comes from and where our water comes from, what we're doing in an emergency is all built in. But also, how do we want to plan and affect change in our environments to ensure our mental and physical health. And that includes actions on the climate and ecological emergency, because as anyone with kids know, kids are terrified. Primary age upwards, there's lots of eco-anxiety, and so this process gives our communities agency. How do we come together and fix this? Because it's such a large, daunting problem, it can be really difficult to know where to start. So then we went on and discussed what themes we will work on as a community, and there were a number of suggestions put forward, and again, it was a democratic process with a long list, picking the top 5 and making a short list. And our short list was transport, energy, food, housing, and biodiversity. And we then went on to use what's called a GROW methodology, which is goal, what we want to achieve, the reality, where we are, the options, what we could do, and also who's going to do it. So it was a GROW methodology. So and the difference between a project and a theme, a good example is, say, food, for instance, overarching theme, but a community allotment or community supported agriculture and space for that is a project, and so we know when it's done. And one of the projects that came out of that was retrofitting, and the goal was to identify properties that need retrofitting and then go and retrofit them. And the reality is some properties around here are listed, you know, and many houses in the area don't meet standards. I think we've got of 550 homes, 484 are band D or below. But we identified which ones they were, looked at their EPCs, downloaded them. And so we know exactly where to start. So we're gathering data. We've done home energy audits in conjunction with Groundwork East, including our pub as well. So we have a starting point. We have an energy audit. We've done used impact calculator tools from Centre for Sustainable Energy to look at where our CO2 comes from as a community. And we're pretty rural, so most of ours comes from heating oil. You know, so getting off oil and improving our heating systems is really important. And in terms of who, you know, so district, parish councils, perhaps reps from local building companies, our colleges need to get involved in retrofits. And actually we're looking at working with the Retrofit Academy in our local college to actually look at apprentices and perhaps employment opportunities via our CBS for retrofitting. And there's a wonderful company up near Manchester called People Powered Retrofit who are leading the way, who are already they're a community benefit society, and they raised £500,000 to kickstart themselves via an ethical investment platform called FX. And so we discussed all of this, and once we'd agreed our plan, essentially, you know, sort of we agreed our values, we agreed our what does health and well-being look like, we've mapped out our stakeholders, we know who needs to be involved, and we've decided the themes that we're working on, and we've also come up with a bunch of projects, and we've also discussed who's going to do that. So we now have working groups on each of those 5 themes, and we came together in a people's assembly, which is again a democratic deliberative process, participatory process. Everyone was invited, not everyone came, to essentially ratify the plan. Are we heading in the right direction? It was an opportunity for change, for clarification, and also for objection, which is very important as we aim to take our communities with us. And what's most important in this process is the plan was written by the community. So everybody had an opportunity to input, and it's their plan. I could have written the plan, but I had to sit my hands and bite my tongue. Because if the plan is written by a team, the team take ownership of it and have a sense of civic duty and pride in what they've created and the action and agency given to the community. Because we're all told about the sort of top 10 things you can do as an individual, but actually we're stronger together and working in cohort, and with our anchor institutions and with our councils, we're much stronger together. And the outcome of what we did is obviously we did it for our 3 parishes, but what we discovered was our neighbouring parishes really liked what was happening. And I came back from a workshop, and there was a neighbouring parish councillor from our neighbouring village of Hinderclay waiting at the pub with a pint. Hi Jules, I'm Andrew, love what you're doing, can we join in? So we've actually grown from 3 to 6 to 9 parishes and local green groups locally. So we formed a Suffolk Green Cluster. We are now on a Community Energy South Pathways programme, which is site identification and feasibility study for community renewable energy. And we are founding members of our Suffolk Community Energy Steering Group in conjunction with our county council. And so we're starting to provide advice and support for other communities within the county that want to look at things like community renewable energy. And having done a similar presentation to the Suffolk Association of Local Councils, the feedback on the forms were, this was fantastic, more of this please, from their annual conference. And that's led to discussions with SALP for us to provide similar sort of community climate action planning workshops to an audience of town and parish councils throughout Suffolk in the spring. So Suffolk's kind of east, mid and west, and so we'll be doing sort of 3 sort of physical in situ sessions. And what you can see on the screen is actually one of our quarterly meetings of our Suffolk Green Cluster. So there's a number of parish councillors sitting at the table, a number of green groups and representations from other villages. And we do quarterly updates on the progress of our respective volunteer working groups in each of those 5 themes: transport, housing, energy, food, and biodiversity. You'll probably be aware of our statutory biodiversity duty that came into force on the 1st of January and how we need to ensure decisions take that into consideration, and also how that should be considered with local nature-based recovery strategy. For instance, our parish council was slightly ahead of the game because we did a biodiversity audit, very comprehensive 50-page document with Suffolk Wildlife Trust, which is on our parish website. Happy to share. In 2020, but I'm curious how it's changed since. It's better or worse, this kind of thing. And so we have a lead on our biodiversity group, which is Andrew. You can see in the red shirt. He's a keen ornithologist and a parish councillor from Hinderclay. And so that's our Suffolk Green cluster. And the outcome of our activity also means there's groups springing up around the country now. Sort of with various levels of maturity, but quite a lot of activity, looking at doing the same and activating the communities where they are. And of course, we're at sort of the innovators stage. Diffusion of innovation bell curve means that we have innovators, early adopters, and then the early majority. The late majority and the laggards are probably your climate deniers. Wouldn't worry about speaking with them. They're maybe never going to join. The late majority, also difficult to get, but they will follow. And where we are is at the innovation stage, as are the people on this call, I would imagine, as is the Great Collaboration, as is a lot of climate activity, with the early adopters starting to join in. And what we really need is that early majority, the early majority. So our activity probably attracted about 5% of our population, which is pretty good going, to ask them to commit to that amount of time as residents and parents and people with busy lives. But 5% is enough for a mandate and to write a plan. And as we've grown, we've attracted more people to the activity. And when you start to get to around 25%, that's the tipping point, and that starts to, be the early majority, where it starts to become normal and normalized, and the rest follow. So we've got groups setting up around the country. We're also our farm and our pub is part of the Climate Emergency Centre network, and Climate Emergency Centre network have 26, I think, hubs around the UK in various rural and city locations, mostly meanwhile used and staffed by volunteers, helping facilitate this kind of activity. And of course, then we come on to the Great Collaboration, and the Great Collaboration was a £100,000 grant-funded project delivered for the Herefordshire Association of Local Councils. And when it had come to the end of its grant funding, it was looking for a home, and we were approached as Community Climate Action, but we're a bunch of volunteers with some limited capacity and limited money, certainly. So we didn't have the capacity to take it on ourselves, and I'm very pleased we didn't, because the outcome of that meant actually that I've met Graham and other members of our team that have rallied together to take the Great Collaboration forward. We've got some limited funding from the Society of Local Council Clerks to kind of get us started. So that's a presentation about what we've been doing in East Anglia and around the country for Community Climate Action. We have a lot of detail, one way and another, in terms of documents, methodologies, and we will be putting similar, and we've got again, webinars and recordings of various different presentations and this kind of thing. And we'll be putting all of this detail onto the Great Collaboration. And what we're really hoping for is to scale this sort of methodology throughout the UK and involve communities in both planning and then delivering community climate action to provide agency, to help remove that deep grief, that anxiety, that despair that we can perhaps sometimes all feel when confronted with such an existential crisis. Because loneliness isn't just an absence of people, is an absence of purpose. So just by coming together, even on a very local base, on a very simple basis, and protecting a small bit of land, that gives us agency and helps us, improves our mental health and well-being. So it meets our social purpose. I'm going to pause for a moment. I do have further sort of tabs open. I can show people a bit about the Great Collaboration, some of the work and development that's going on in the background, and some of our plans, and also some of the digital tools we've used to facilitate community climate action planning, and a couple of documents just outlining approaches to things like regenerative settlements and site identification for net zero construction, and also things like again, site identification for community renewable energy. And those are precisely the kind of resources, learning and skills that we hope to make available via the Great Collaboration. Because why reinvent the wheel? So that's community climate action in a nutshell. And as I say, we're really looking to do train the trainer to scale around the country. We'll likely be figuring out quite how we deliver it on Zoom as well. And we are also, in conjunction with the Great Collaboration, applying for funding to support further activity in pilots, i.e. planning, workshops and community climate action planning with SALC. And we'd be delighted to support anyone else around the country. So like I say, I'll pause there a moment and just hear any feedback, questions or reactions. And then if we've got time before we finish, I'll show you around some of the tools we've got.
Joolz, let me leap in first of all to say, on a score of 0 to 10, I'm awarding you 12 for that one. Stunning. Let me also give you the benefit of a really superb education, and I've searched my vocabulary for the right word to describe this, and I've concluded that wow is superb. So well done. Thank you very much. Let me ask people who wish to ask questions if they can please use the electronic raise hand symbol, because that A puts everyone in right order of calling them, and B, it lets me see who's coming. And if there's anyone who doesn't know how to use the raise hand, just wave your hand at me now and I will ignore you completely. So let's move on. Tristram, you were instantly there. So off you go, please.
Well, you just stolen my thunder. Joolz, that was absolutely brilliant. Well done, and thank you very much. As it happens, I was at a meeting yesterday evening of Hart District Council, who've declared a climate emergency engagement group, and this is their second meeting. And it was absolutely flat as a pancake because they didn't want to involve the communities and the parishes. They were trying to sort of impose things a bit from the top, but they didn't know what to impose. So it was a pretty dire thing. And I think the idea of community action is key. And one of the items on the agenda was renewable energy. And your paper about how to identify sites would be wonderful, because I think that's what we'd like to do. What the question I have is, you went through this big process of involving the community in creating your plan, which as you said, made it owned by them, if you like. So that's how I guess you got your cohesion. To what extent do you think, if we use your plan as a model, do you think there's a danger of losing that idea that the communities invented it and own it?
Yes, I do think there's a danger. I think you mentioned imposition from the top. And I would use the term plan being parachuted in. There's certainly a sense in society that somebody else will fix this, that the government will fix this, that it's the council will fix this, that's not my problem. And I don't necessarily think anyone is coming to save us. So I think that this the process is really important because it activates individuals and gives individuals agency to act. So the plan itself, or the outcome, is not less important, but as important as the process, because it's the process that activates the community. And what we've discovered, because we've done it in a number of place-based areas, and we have refined the delivery of it over the summer. We've done it at festivals, we've done it around the country, we've now done it at the Centre for Alternative Technology, this kind of thing. And we've learned that maybe some pointers are helpful. We've also discovered that there are differences between communities, invariably, in terms of priorities, but there is parity between communities. So pretty much everyone will have a pub. You know, everyone will have a school. That, you know, there'll be a university nearby. And one of the key questions I'm asked is, well, you're very rural. How will this work in Sheffield, for instance, in an urban environment? And so that parity is important, but it's also really important that the community get to choose and make those decisions for themselves, because their priorities might be different from mine. And again, that's part of the process in terms of deliberative democracy, because politics is a participatory sport, not a spectator sport. So it actually encourages attendance at parish meetings by the community, and this kind of actually encourages collaboration between our political representatives and the community, by giving that kind of agency. And of course, that's absolute magic for a small parish council, because we're all volunteers and we don't have the capacity to deliver all of this, you know, or the budgets. We absolutely need help from the community. So yes, it's and it can be a bit of a scary process, because they might not do what you want them to do. You know? So I can imagine how that might be a bit terrifying for a district council, this kind of thing. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. I think the process is as important, though different areas are taking different approaches. So there are town councils that have specifically just asked us as consultants to come in and write a plan and then do a public consultation. And again, I've suggested, for the same reasons I've just explained, there might be a better approach. But certainly the plan can be used as templates, and it's certainly good ideas. You know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Joolz and Tristram. Lisa, you're next, please.
Thank you. I am so pleased I've come across this group. I'm heading in the same direction, and to have your past experience to begin to be able to learn from would be fantastic. We've actually got a piece of land that Parish Council have been renting off of a local diocese for decades, and the lease was coming up, and I proposed that we maybe want to buy that piece of land. It's got a brook running through it that we can re-wiggle. We've got various patchy flooding issues in the parish, and I've already had agreement from the parish council that we'll do a parish-wide water flow assessment and look at historic ditches, and the Thames Water have agreed to do an infiltration test in the sewage pipes, so we can bring the water flow, rainwater flow, back to where it should be, and then use this field to re-wiggle. But this could be looking back on historical maps, there used to be a pond, a very big pond in it, and that was filled in, and that seems to be one of the reasons why we've got this patchy flooding in areas. And logic makes it all fall together, but to put together a plan like this to get the community buy-in would be fantastic. And now I've got this piece of land that could be a potential. That would be really interesting if we can keep in contact. We were looking at using, with semi-rural as well, using collaboration with farmers and doing things like mole plough, mole drilling to get the rainwater to stay on the fields more, but not on the surface of the fields, which would help with the drainage and alleviate the patchy flooding, but also help to make the farmers' fields more resilient, because they'd have water at a lower level. So all of those things coming together, and using that piece of land for community energy project as well. So I'm really looking forward to implementing something with the community here as well. We're in Surrey.
Wow.
That sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
Yes, farmers and flooding. We're a rural farming community. My my day job has been consulting with the Farming Wildlife Advisory Group to help farmers transition to regenerative agriculture. And a key element of that is, again, flood resilience. And there is a market, just like biodiversity and carbon. Flood mitigation costs DEFRA, or DEFRA invests around 700 million a year. It costs the insurance industry in 2022 500 million, and I think last year probably upping to about 1 billion. The government's launched a reflood reinsure market, which is basically subsidised insurance for those whose premiums have gone through the roof. And the solution to that often isn't large-scale civil engineering projects that cost a lot, take time, might fail, and don't plan for future events. It's regenerative agriculture, like you say, no-till, cover cropping, a 1% increase in soil carbon captures 250,000 litres per hectare, roughly. So by increasing our soil carbon, we capture and hold that water. Storm Babbitt was 100 millimetres in 36 hours, which is about 50% of our annual rainfall, so no wonder it flooded. And the runoff we had here brings inorganic phosphates, herbicides, pesticides, toxic stuff straight into our river, and also leaves about 6 inches of topsoil on the roads and in our drains, and in our rivers. So there is nowhere for the water to go. So love to have some conversations about that. Perhaps, I mean, I've got our flood, our water management plan mapped out on some of the tools that I might show you. So yeah, so plenty to talk about there. So that sounds super exciting. And as a value-based proposition for the village, everyone generally cares about nature-based recovery and clean water. It's a focus. It's a place to start. So how exciting.
I have popped my email in the chat. Thank you so much.
Right. Yeah.
Let me just step in a second, if I may, to let everyone know that thanks to artificial intelligence, this conversation is being covered by AI, and hopefully it will come up with a list of all sorts of useful topics and summaries of what we've been talking about, which will be made available to everybody afterwards. So I'm holding out the hope, but I have to confess I've not done it before, so we'll see what happens. Belinda, would you like to have a go, please?
Hi, yes, thanks. Thanks, Jules. Amazing. I've just been delivering carbon literacy for town and parish councillors and community groups. And definitely part of the theme is we can't just wait for people to tell us what to do, because I think an awful lot of parish councillors, in my experience, they're quite risk aversive. And it's not that they're deniers or they don't want to do the right thing. They literally either don't have the knowledge or they don't have the confidence to think that they've got agency. So actually, I just keep saying we cannot wait for central government. We can't wait for our principal authority. Let's just do it from the ground up. And each, as you were saying, each sort of place's responses are going to be very different according to what the capacity is there locally. So some people, like you were saying, we've had amazing success with our river groups because everyone's interested in it. And yet far less on trying to get interested in how do we decarbonise transport, because the mindset is all, well, that's the principal authority's responsibility. So I guess my question is, because I think a lot of what I'm trying to do is to sort of link up, trying to encourage Dorset Council to relate much more closely to the town and parishes and the community groups. So I'm just wondering, do you work on a sort of consultancy basis when you go in and help other people set up these, bottom-up community-led things? How does that actually work? Because I would love to get involved. I'd love you down here.
Fantastic.
I was just going to say I'm a Dorset councillor for Lyme Regis and Charmouth, and Charmouth has just been awarded some, or Dorset Council on Charmouth's behalf, some DEFRA funding to look at the fact that they're no longer going to have any coastal protection. And so it's looking at flooding, it's looking at increased storms, and what does the village have to do to adapt, knowing that it's not going to be protected. And we've just had a meeting this morning and everyone's got different ideas, but and it's definitely something the community will have to be involved in. And so having your help with, because I think quite often if it's one of us trying to do it, you get a kind of, they don't listen. If you have somebody from outside coming in, more people are willing to buy into it.
Sure. So in simple terms, to answer your question, yes, myself and others on the team provide consultancy services. And it is just that, it's in consultation with either community and or local authority, parish council. Where we are in Suffolk, we're a group of parish councils and residents and community members and NGOs and what have you. And we work in consultation with our district and our county council, because we're working in support of their policies and targets.
Yep.
So actually, it's generally a great sigh of relief going, oh, thank you so much for helping. That's brilliant. So yeah, I'd be delighted to sort of take a look at at where you are. I've just done a very similar deep dive for a town in Hampshire, and again that was identifying who's the local wildlife trust, who's the local farming wildlife advisory group, which is a membership organization for farmers, the district council, the county council, where what the local resilience forum is. We're responsible for emergency planning and who the stakeholders are in that. So it's those kind of things, yeah. And I'll send you a copy of the proposal we've written for that piece of work, Belinda. And
brilliant, thank you very much.
It would be really insightful.
Jules, could you send that to all of us? I'd be interested in that too.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll check with the specific town council it's for, because it's kind of in commercial confidence with their details. But I'm sure, I mean, there's no real sensitive information in it, so I'm sure that would be fine.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you all. James, your turn, please.
Well, I thought that was really interesting, and we entirely agree with you about, and what other speakers have said about you can't wait for someone to rescue you, and in fact the fact that people are not doing things is a reason for doing more rather than less, because if they're not doing it, someone's got to do it, and if no one else is doing it, then that means us, doesn't it? The thing I wanted to say, it's I feel quite challenged by some of the things in your presentation, and I think it's sort of challenge back, and it's attention. And there's a very important thing which you're highlighting about how you generate community ownership. But the other side of the coin, and I think this is largely where we've been coming from in Britain, is there's some things that absolutely have to happen. The science tells us what they are, and there's no ifs and buts about them. And I'm thinking of decarbonising transport, reducing our terrible energy performance of our buildings, and decarbonising domestic heating, etc. We all know these things, or at least I expect everyone in this group knows all those things off by heart. And if anything useful is going to result, those things just have to be in there. So it's how one resolves that tension. And when in the past, and this is going back about 3 or 4 years ago, we have an organisation called One Planet Britain. It's a sort of alliance of it's a CIC, but it's an alliance of local people who are interested in taking the One Planet agenda forward. And when they've done sessions which are very much like you describe, lots of nice little things resulted, and they're nice to have, but they're not actually going to make the difference that needs to be made. And it's how we resolve that tension. I'm just interested in your response.
When you say resolve tension, do you mean between, say, community benefit in terms of surplus accruing to the community versus private ownership? Or do you mean what we need to do at scale in terms of the tension?
I mean what we need to do at scale to reduce
Sure.
carbon emissions. So, I'm very much talking about what the science says we need to do.
Oh, absolutely. The science is clear.
Yeah.
We don't engage in the process in any debate on the science. If people want to go and either educate, or we also don't provide any education on the science. There are really good workshops for that, including things like The Week, which is an early stage film watching thing. There's Climate Fresque, which is a really good interactive thing on the science. We want to decarbonize our community within a decade and increase biodiversity along the way at scale and at speed. If, as a community, we start retrofitting houses now and do 3 a month, which is a lot, it will take us 13 years. So we do need to move at scale, and that then precipitates questions like, well, where does the material come from? What's the value chain? How many pairs of hands have we got nationally? In Suffolk, we've got 300,000 houses that need retrofitting. We need to move fast, and we do need to move at scale. So some of our plans for community renewable energy are literally for, we'll power 1,500 homes. So our pub will be a net exporter of energy in the hub of a smart, or the cornerstone of a smart energy microgrid for the village. So we've got clear routes to funding. So we've received some limited funding from Community Energy South for initial desktop feasibility studies. We've got a pipeline of projects that include some quite large onshore wind and hundreds of acres of solar farms. They're actually agrivoltaics, so they're solar on stilts, so you can still use the land for productive agricultural activity, be it livestock and or crop production. But that's at scale, and so really, yes, as you say, some CICs and what have you might do some relatively nice, really lovely projects, and some small things and activities in the community, and might have a day where you meet up and have a go on electric bike day kind of thing. No, we've got much grander ambitions, and we hope to retrofit all of our homes and install community renewable energies. So we'll power up and power down to become net zero within a decade. I think the toughest nut for us to crack around here will be transport, because our nearest bus stop is 2 miles away. But we are looking at what's the lowest hanging fruit. How can we reduce that, rather than the classic kind of trajectory of the curve that the government and others see at the moment is, we're just going to carry on, maybe keep emitting, and then we'll suddenly come down at 2050. What's really important is we start that journey now, and it becomes more of a drop in the linear curve to hit that 2050 target, or whatever the target might be, where you are. So it is very much acting in cohort and acting at scale. And acting with the relevant suitable funding in place. So our pipeline that I can show you, we are applying to the government's Community Energy Fund, and that will fund up to £140,000 in feasibility and planning for those community renewable energy projects. And then the capital funding for those, which might be up to £5 million, for instance, for a large wind turbine, can then come through community shares, blended finance from either Public Works Loan Board borrowing with our respective parish, district or county councils. In Suffolk, we're looking at community municipal bonds. So that would be underwritten by the county council, and would allow members of the community and or pension institutions to invest in those, because they're AAA rated. And that might attract investment up to, say, 100 million quid from a pension investment management fund, where they couldn't necessarily invest direct because of the risk and due diligence required for smaller institutions. So a clear route to funding as well. So I hope that answers your question, James, about the tension, and just sort of how we're aiming to look to work at scale and speed.
It doesn't really, because I think what's at the heart of what I'm saying is it's about trust. I mean, obviously your plan has got those things in, but if you just if you have a completely participative who turns up, says what they think should happen, are you inevitably going to end up with the things that the science says has to happen? That's my I suppose that's another of my question, and it's very tempting because it's
Sure.
very clear what
I mean,
has to happen.
so to answer that, James, we fly at every household, and we got 5% of the population, and that 5% are the innovators.
Mm.
And they're the same as you and I in this room. We are clear, we know what the science is, we know what needs to be done.
Mm.
The 95% that didn't show up are the early majority, late majority, and the laggards and the climate deniers. So the people in the room were all pretty much au fait with the science. They were really worried and they wanted to take action. And what we know is that 80% of people don't think the government's doing enough, and that 60% of people want to take action but don't know what to do. And through this process, it gives that 60% agency. So yes, I mean, it's science-led in that, you know, we've simply set a target of really aiming to support and meet our district and county policy and targets.
Okay.
So I hope that helps, and that will vary depending on where you are. We're really lucky; our target's 2030. Others are going to be 2050. Some may not have any. So, but yes.
So thank you very much. Let me press on because some people are having to leave as you run out of time.
Sorry,
Joolz, let me just address your attention to the chat. There's a question for Kirsten for you. And in the meantime, Stuart, would you like to have a go, please?
Hi, thanks. Yes, I'd really like to thank Joolz. That's a fantastic presentation, and I really admire the work you're getting done. I would just like to say that I've recently been involved with the South Lakes Action on Climate Change group, together with Kendal Council. And their approach to the whole issue was to set up a citizens' jury. They advertised around the town. They got quite a lot of applicants. They sifted the applicants depending on age, occupation, where they lived, this, that, and the other. I think they came up with about 30 citizens who met probably about half a dozen times. And they came up with 22 recommendations, which are now being taken forward by Kendal Council. I just thought it was a different way of doing it, but it still got involvement of the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to quickly address that, I'm a massive fan of deliberative democracy, citizens' assemblies and people's assemblies. And it's a lovely deliberative way to, as you say, to come up with those kind of actions. My only reservation with that is those 22 recommendations are, again, the responsibility for delivering those is divested to somebody else. That's an end of the process. And also, depending on it very much depends on you know, what the future might hold for that council, both in terms of the representation on the council, in terms of the individual personnel and the councillors. That can change over time. You know, seen dramatic changes in action or inaction, depending on who gets in and elected, or what budgets there may or may not be. I do think it's a really elegant process, and we actually had a citizens' assembly in the UK on climate, and made amazing recommendations to the government that then the government failed to act on. I also personally held the first ever People's Assembly, or facilitated and organised the first ever People's Assembly in the Houses of Westminster with citizens and MPs and mayors, to do this as a sort of similar planning exercise, coming up with the actions and activities that each of the ministries should be considering. But I'm a massive fan of that as a process. So yeah, definitely don't stop, and that's really good. I was on the campaign team for Jamie Driscoll, who's the mayor in North Newcastle and north of Tyne, and helped write his policy manifesto. And one of the first things we put in the manifesto was, we'll hold a citizens' assembly on climate, and that was in 2019. and Jamie then got 80,000 through cabinet and went and held the Citizens Assembly. And I'm delighted to say, you know, his combined authority is well on the way to delivering those kind of recommendations. Like I say, my only caveat and fear is it then, while it's a consultative process, it doesn't actually give agency to the community in terms of action or ownership. But it's brilliant activity, and I'm delighted to see it happening. Don't stop. You know, it's really good.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you all very much. Let me make a couple of announcements before I go forward with a couple of questions I've got for you, Joolz. So I'm delighted to say that the organization of this group is so superb nowadays that you, having mentioned about what happens when it floods and all the runoffs into streams and the phosphates and the nitrogen pollution and so forth, means that our discussion next week will be about Beneath the Surface, which is a documentary, if you will, about the River Evenlode in Cotswolds, and Jennifer is kindly offered to run that for us. So we already know what's going to be happening next week, which is extraordinary. I also was desperate for topics and people to speak on here, so I asked if anybody amongst our group could come up with a list of names, and the most astonishing list came back from Joolz, which had every famous name under the sun. And clearly he's mentioned a couple of those names today, so obviously he's well associated with them. I actually noticed that he said that one of the speakers should be King Charles and the next one should be the Prince of Wales. And then there was a little note beside the back that said, I don't know either of these two. Does anyone know a way to get hold of them? So if anyone is linked directly to Charles or to whichever the Prince of Wales is nowadays, please let us know. And I had one other thing that's the thing. So then the question I had for Joolz was, you mentioned putting solar panels on the roof of the pub. And I just wondered, is there any, agreement nowadays on whether there should be any mix of solar heating panels as opposed to just photovoltaic panels, or is solar heating now a dead duck?
I would say it's a combination for any renewable energy. It's invariably a combination of various bits of microgeneration. That can be things like just recycling the heat from our cellar cooler. And yeah, we'll be taking advice on the best technology. We'll probably have a combination of air source, ground source, solar, and we're also looking at district heating. Via ground source, we're looking at excess renewable energy powering what's called powering sand batteries. And sand batteries are sort of grain silo size. You heat the sand up with your excess energy and it heats up to 500 degrees and it stores the heat for months for district heating and that kind of thing. These things have already been deployed in Finland because, you know, Russia turned off their gas and it gets pretty cold there. So a variety of different technologies to look at for the pub, and also investigating things like flexible solar panels that are made from bio-based materials. They have a shorter shelf life, 10 years, not 25, this kind of thing, but they use bio-based materials, potentially even translucent solar cells for use on things like the agrivoltaics, to allow different levels of sunlight through. So when we start to look at growing in shade or growing under solar on stilts. I mean, I can, if you're interested, show you our community energy site identification with some of the examples we're perhaps looking at.
Go for it, provided, you know, people, if they reach the end of their time, then feel free to drop off. And I will just say that all of the comments that are coming up in the chat section will be forwarded to everybody afterwards, so you don't need to keep track of the links. We'll send them out for you. So please carry on, Joolz, for anyone who wants to stay on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, as Graham says, if you need to dive off, please do. You know, I won't take it personally. But for anyone interested, I've got a few. I'll show you a few extra bits and bobs.
Whilst you're doing that, I'll just note there's still two people who've just raised their hands, so we'll get to them.
Oh, okay, sure. Happy to answer any questions. So please fire away.
So Lisa, would you like to talk whilst Joolz is showing?
Yeah, thanks. And mine was a bit of an answer to your question about solar for hot water. And I've been looking into this recently, and there's some really interesting upgrades or new technologies coming along. One company of which is called Solar Assist Heat Pumps, which purely do hot water, and it works more like a PV panel to heat the water. But there's an annual expo in London called Future Build, where all of these companies that do all of these amazing things all come together, and it's 3 days, the middle of March, the first week of March, for 3 days. If anyone has any time to get there, it's all the latest technologies from the people that produce it, and I've been going for years, but it's brilliant.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And I would second that, Lisa. I regularly go, and it is very, very interesting in a number of ways. Yeah.
And if you'd like to do your interlude now, Jules, and we'll come back to the other questions when you're done.
Okay, sure. So as you can see on screen, this is the picture of the pub that I mentioned. We're also looking at doing our local school, dentist, shop, and village hall simultaneously. And we're looking at a smart energy microgrid that might be delivered peer-to-peer. So that means we can sell electricity backwards and forwards. That's depending on headroom capacity, substation location, this kind of thing, working with a company called Urban Chain, who provides some of the technology for that. Urban Chain already delivered a district council solar for business scheme in a similar vein. We're talking to Bury St Edmunds Cathedral and the Bishop of Suffolk. They want to put solar panels on the roof of the cathedral, and then having an extended conversation, hopefully with a local diocese in relation to our churches. And the cathedral is relatively advanced with their own research, but by being owned by the community, we can access some of the Community Energy Fund funding for feasibility, so deliver some benefits there. And this is agrivoltaics. So as you can see, kind of solar on stilts, and we're looking at 2 or 3 different 200-acre sites for agrivoltaics. And that allows you to either grow crops or graze livestock underneath, both of which are great for carbon sequestration and biodiversity increase, and not, which is the most common objection to planning, turning over prime agricultural land to simply to solar. In Germany, they're using it to grow. They're growing hops very successfully. In Kenya, they do broccoli and other brassica and this kind of thing. And actually, as it gets hotter, it helps manage transevaporation and less water in terms of crop production, but also provides shade. You know, plants on our farm were actually getting burnt by the sun. I mean, literally going brown and, you know, burnt, rather than going brown because it didn't have enough water, well, actually just burnt by the temperature of the sun. So shade becomes important. We're working with a team in Norwich that are looking at New Mill's pumping station, which is a grade 2 listed pumping station, and they're quite advanced with their plans for hydroelectricity. And then we're looking at onshore wind, and there has been a few more successful onshore wind projects recently. I think it's going to be more popular, and certainly if we get a different government, that will open the floodgates to a lot of onshore wind. We're actually hoping to work with a company called Modvion, which do timber towers. The blades are still steel, but the tower itself is made of wood. So we hope to be the first wooden wind turbine in the UK. Or possibly 3. But as you can see at scale, one of these turbines might, large-scale turbine might power up to 1,500 homes. So we're looking to rapidly decarbonize our power supply. So there's a little bit about our plans for community energy. Because we are the Great Collaboration, I'll come back to our website. So what we're hoping to do is put some of these content tools, direction and signposting on the website. And we will also be building a login to this platform, which is kind of Facebook off Facebook, which is a really handy tool. We have a members directory, so again we can all see who's who and we can chat. You'll be able to create discussions, requests, offers, resources, projects, events and groups in your area, and you will be able to see each other on a map, because mapping is super important. And what we're hoping to do is actually integrate some parish online services into this, so that some of the excellent existing sort of services, sorry, I'm just going to try and, my connection is a little slow, but we can start to see where, you know, sort of where our respective groups are. We'll be loading on Friends of the Earth groups and Transition Town groups and that kind of thing, so we can all collectively see where we are, get together and collaborate. We've got partnerships with sports, you know, sports clubs around the UK, schools via the Ministry of Eco Education, which is Dale Vince initiative. So that's for, you know, 4,000 schools signed up, and more on the way. And so you can start to see, when we start to get pubs, sports clubs, schools, councils and communities involved, that really is the great collaboration, and we can all participate in this. Parish Online have some excellent tools for map data. So you can actually look at flood data, and I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this. And you can also do things like look at EPCs, energy performance certificates, and download, see the EPCs, but then see which ones you get the biggest bang for your buck. And I understand, and I've had a sneak demo of some beta functionality that actually helps locate potential renewable energy sites. Certainly might show you where you can't put a wind turbine because of flights. I've used a free tool called Land Explorer to actually map and look at ordnance survey maps. It's not got the same level of features or functionality or granularity as Parish Online, which is why I think is the great collaboration, that's our partner of choice. But certainly on here, I will just quickly show you our water management plan for iFarm, because we flooded in Storm Babbitt and had 4 foot of water. And it's interesting that you mention, Lisa, a pond, because this is shown as a pond on the Ordnance Survey, but it's not generally a pond. It's somebody's front garden, but when it rains, their furniture floats away and it becomes a pond. And this map very briefly shows where we'll put berms, ditches, French drains, drainage, where the water will flow, the volume of water and this kind of thing, and as part of our water management plan. So I'd be delighted to talk about that further, and also use this kind of data. Land Explorer also has land registry data, so it'll tell you title and deed, or sorry, title and property reference number, which you can then go and look up on land registry. And so we've done a variety of bits of site identification for different prospective areas for development in our local parishes. And I say development, that means green space and horticultural production, and possibly some regenerative settlement with some small scale dwellings for people that might need to live inside to meet the needs of our local community. So that's some of the kind of information documentation we can share, and a quick glimpse at some of the tools, you know, some of the tools. And I'd be really interested in doing a deeper dive into some of the digital tools, doing digital training at some point in the future. So I'll stop there and go back to Amanda and Jennifer, who've been very, very patient with their hand raise.
I just feel like there's going to be an anticlimax now with my question. That's brilliant. Could I ask you about going right back to when you mentioned about Community Benefit Society, and you chose that model as opposed to, say, cooperatives or charity, or what have you? And I'd really interested if you've got anything, preferably if there's anything written down that you could send on, rather than take up time now. But I'm interested in that particular model and why you chose that over anything else, particularly over any cooperative models, because I did come from a cooperative background. Just to declare, I'm director with Mid Counties Co-op that has the association with Octopus. And are you aware of Unity that I think are going to come and talk to us separately? So I'm interested in the cooperative model, but equally I'm interested in the right model for the right setting in the right time.
Sure. No, I'm delighted. I'm a massive fan of co-ops.
Great.
The mapping application Land Explorer that I just showed you has become a co-op. I helped develop it as a minimum viable product. It subsequently spun out of the think tank and become a co-op. It's a platform co-op. It's operated by Digital Commons, which is also a co-op, digitalcommons.co-op, which focus on linked open data. And I went through a platform co-op accelerator program with Co-ops UK called Unfound, and then delivered a pitch at Co-ops UK annual conference for a thing called Funding Spark for platform co-ops. And we crowdfunded 20 grand on the day to fund other platform co-ops, which is great. A community benefit society effectively is a co-op. So we're governed by the Cooperatives and Societies Act 2014. So it's a cooperative with the difference that a community benefit society can benefit from investment with community shares. I think that's the primary difference. I'm not necessarily an expert, but I think that's the primary difference is we can issue shares to the community, and it's an unregulated financial activity. So we can raise capital like that.
Did you think that can not only created the funding stream, the income potential that was different to if you'd been a charity status, but also perhaps contributed to the community buy-in that you've been so very successful in getting?
Yes, so the Plunkett Foundation is the kind of membership organization for community rural businesses. There's thousands of businesses, a lot, and most community pubs. So I'd suggest the majority of community-owned pubs and community-owned energy use a CBS model because it allows for issuing of shares in which is unregulated activity. We're registered with the Financial Conduct Authority rather than Companies House. As a charity, you subsist on donations, and there are different ways or different reasons you might choose either or. And in a group of organisations, you might have both for different purposes. So often in the private sector, you find that a PLC will have various holding companies, probably some in the Virgin Islands, and they then hold their branding offshore in Luxembourg to avoid tax. There's no reason we can't use similar organizational, structural, legal forms for delivery of different purposes. When advising a community group, I often suggest that the organization should behave in the fashion of the governance or the way they're suggesting for the potential legal form for at least 6 months, because it's like a jumper. You might find it's a bit itchy and it doesn't quite fit. And there are different legal forms. As a community benefit society, we're like a co-op. We're a membership society. We are one member, one vote. It doesn't matter how much money someone's put in, between 50 quid or 10,000, you get one vote. Our management committee is democratically elected annually at our annual general meeting. So we're democratically controlled and community owned, so very, very much like a co-op, and I'm a huge fan of the cooperative movement. The co-op sector turns over 36 billion in the UK, and I think there's something like 7,000 plus co-ops in the UK. And cooperative development is precisely one of the reasons we chose this legal form. A couple of other reasons. Number one, we're a business. We must make a profit. But that profit goes to a purpose, so it goes to fulfill our any surplus goes to fulfill our social purpose. And what that means is there's no shareholder primacy. So it means that surplus doesn't accrue to the benefit of the shareholders and the institutional investors and then disappears offshore and is taken out of the community. It's based on the premise that the surplus stays within the community, which helps with community wealth building. And then also we can influence other systemic change, but with our procurement policies. co-ops helping co-ops, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, love to talk more about that. And sorry, are you Amanda or Jennifer? I don't know. You've got
I'm Amanda.
Amanda.
And Jennifer is who's doing the talk next week. So Amanda Davis, and I'm in Bourton-on-the-Water.
Fantastic. Yeah,
Well, in fact, we're both in Bourton-on-the-Water, believe it or not.
Cool.
You see the
Cool.
joke there? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of co-ops. So any other sort of comments or questions?
I think we're going to call it a halt, Joolz, to say it was a wonderful session, very uplifting, very reassuring, and it's going to be a down for the rest of the day because what's next?
Sure.
Some of us, those who are well prepared and organized, will just be doing their income tax. So
Yes.
So may I say thank you all very much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and thank you very particularly to Joolz. It made a great session, and I'll be sending out all the details, the documentation, the video, and hopefully Joolz's presentation to you afterwards. Thank you all so much. Take care. See you next week.
Thanks, everybody. And please do get in touch via Graham or otherwise if you want to talk further at all. Really happy to help. And very exciting to hear about all of your respective projects. So
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks
Bye.
very much.